Jeremy, how's it going today?
It's great. Good to see you again.
No, yeah, we've seen each other quite a bit the past few days, all on three different topics. But today we're going to be focusing on experience, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no further ado, let's launch into the chat.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And for anyone who was here yesterday, please forgive the hiccup, but we're here today. So let's talk about brewing up a great experience. I'm gonna scroll over to. I've got some slides, so let me do that real quick. Can you guys all see this?
We're adding them in right now for you, Jeremy. All
All right.
good?
Perfect. So for some of you who I haven't met or haven't got to know me, just a little bit of background. I spent 20 years, almost 20 years in the Northwest, and really got into the beer scene up there. Worked in different capacities. I'm now an Advanced Cicerone, a judge, a brewer, and do a bunch of beer content. But I've spent a lot of time in restaurants and in breweries, and so the whole idea of an experience really is really kind of what this is all about for me. So let's talk about brewing up an experience. I'm kind of go back and kind of set the stage for this stuff. I mean, back in the early days of, remember when we used to call it microbreweries, or at least back in my day, we called them microbreweries, right? We were going after something different. This is that cycle of the craft beer that we're kind of in this loop now, but we wanted something different. And back then it was, instead of the yellow fizzy beer, we wanted a blonde, we wanted a pale, maybe an IPA and a porter. And that's all it took to open up a good brewery, was just to have some beer with color and maybe a little bit of flavor. Then we wanted more variety. We wanted more than just 3 beers or 4 beers. And then we got to a point where, if you had a better version of a pale ale, then you were you rose to the top amongst your competition, right? And then you fast forward today, now we're in this loop again where we want something different. We want hazies, we want sours, we want spontaneous fermentation, we want stuff beyond beer, right? And when it comes to variety, we want access to all of it, because maybe today I want a saison, tomorrow I want an Ola Brewing, and 2 days from now I want a hazy. And then that quest for a better quality is just constantly never ending. So this is the loop that we're in. This is how we are trying to outcompete each other in the brewery biz.
And Jeremy, I have to ask you,
Yeah,
we're talking about all this delicious beer. You've mentioned some of my favorite styles, but
yeah.
when did you start to realize there was more to the craft beer world than the beer? And when did you start to focus on the experience portion of our industry?
Uh, I forget the year, but I remember that it was my gateway beer. I remember, I can draw a line between now and when I first started getting interested in beer, and I remember just being tired of that yellow fizz that we just drink when you go out with the gang, and I started seeking something better. And it was the day that I got back in. Probably in circa 94, I grabbed a Newcastle Brown, and that was the first moment that I actually started attaching names to what I was tasting. I was kind of thinking about what I was tasting, and it kind of opened up the world. And from then on, going in, working at different restaurants and exploring different foods, and then the wines and the beers that came out of that. And then there was just an explosion of personal experience, watching the movie Somme, and then traveling to Europe in 2015 and just kind of seeing it all there. Everything just opened up in a way that realized that there's so much beyond the flavor. There's so much beyond the beer, so much beyond the food that encompasses who we are as people. And that's kind of what I try and bring into that experience.
No, I love it. Thanks for sharing.
Does that answer your question?
That does.
Um, and so as we kind of move on and we try to figure out how do we create this experience, and actually I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. The reason why Andrew and I put together this, or talked about this experience, or I pitched it to him, was that's kind of the buzzword in the industry today, is providing a craft beer experience. And the question I had was, what exactly does that mean? And it's going to be different for everyone. And so that's where we get into, why we need to figure out what this means. So I'm going to move on. Where are we now? So we've got 9,000 breweries in the U.S., almost 9,000 breweries in the U.S. Competition is on the rise. And once upon a time, just having a beer with color and flavor and some decent French fries to go along with was all you needed to have a good experience or to stand out amongst the crowd. Those days are gone. To be honest, I hate to be blunt, but the fact is that you can have good beer, you can have good food, you can have a comfortable place and friendly staff, and that's just the minimum standard at this point. Pandemic stuff aside, this is just kind of where we are. So it's like it's almost as if the consumers are saying, "That's great. What else you got?" Right? And so we need to figure out what else we can offer. So creating that experience and figuring out what exactly that means. I'm seeing what I think what's the writing on the wall or the signs in the industry is that we're, as an industry, we're about ready to kick into another gear. I mean, you have a lot of people putting out better education. You have consumers that are better educated on beer, and pairing beer and food is now kind of a common discussion. And the customer demand is, granted, one, we just wanted to get out of the house. Now we're out of the house and we want something better. So we have to figure out what we can do to provide that experience, to make things better, and to ultimately outdo the competition and bring people into our brewery and our pub.
And Jeremy, there's so many little aspects that result in the greater sum of the entire experience. And when I go into a brewery, especially for the first time, one of the little things that really catches my eye is the brewery's menu. Does it have all the information that we're looking for? Does it talk about the beer name, the style, the ABV, the options that you can order it, whether it's to go, and the prices? That's one of the first things I notice. And the other day, I actually went to a brewery, and the brewery had a humongous menu, but the only thing on it was the names of the beer. And I had never been there before. And I'm looking at all these crazy words and titles, and it meant nothing to me. That's one of the first things that I noticed. Now, when you go to a tap room for the first time, do you have that one little thing you're always looking for?
Honestly, no. I'm trying to take it all in. I'm trying to the simplest way I can put it is I walk in, and to put it in woo-woo terms, it's like, I'm trying to feel the vibe, because I can take in all this information in a general way all at once, and it's just, what does it feel like? Are the servers and bartenders rushing? Do they have a scowl on their face? Is the place well lit? But I mean, I formed some impressions even before I even see the menu. And like you, I kind of feel like if we have any Park and Rec fans out there, sometimes I feel like Ron Swanson at a Home Depot, where someone comes up and they say, "Hey, can I tell you about the beers?" I just want to say, "I know more than you." Not in a jerk way, but it's like I'm very comfortable with my beer knowledge. So if you give me that information, the ABV, the IBUs, even if you expand it to like the OG, the FG, the Plato, and SRMs, it's like I know I know how to put that information together. But like you illustrated, if we go to some other restaurant and they have a list of wines, and all I've got are these names that are either in French or Italian that I maybe can't even read, I have no idea where to begin, and that's frustrating, and that's where we have to have the staff jump in there, and we're going to talk about that too. That's an extremely important part of the experience for me, is to have people that know what they're talking about.
Yeah, you nailed it. The education component is absolutely vital for a great taproom experience.
Yeah, in fact, I think we'll talk about this in more detail, but I think having a savvy staff can cover up all manner of sins in a restaurant. And so we'll talk about that in just a minute. Let's see. So I worked years ago. I worked at an Italian restaurant. It was a chain. It was a corporate chain, but they really did things well. In fact, their mission statement was to be the most authentic Italian experience outside of Italy, and I think they did a fantastic job. You walk in, and they greet you with a buongiorno or buonasera, and they were originally a bakery first, so there's always fresh baked bread delivered every single day. All the pasta was handmade that day. The place smelled like roasted chicken. That was just incredible. I mean, you walk in and it was an experience. And that's one of the things that kind of defines the work that I do now, was this experience working for this Italian restaurant.
Are we talking Olive Garden right now, Jeremy? What are
we are not talking Olive Garden. Actually, I'll give it a little shout out. This was Il Fornaio. This was a chain restaurant. If you haven't been to one, I urge you to go there. The cool thing was it was all about education. I remember the day they busted out, or they finally brought Franziskaner German wheat ale. They taught us how to properly pour it and present it at the table. This is an Italian restaurant that is all about wine. They had their own like name brand wine, but they taught us how to pour this special German wheat beer. And they even do like regional menus because they wanted to educate and take their guests on an experience of not only exploring Italian food, but a very specific region and the differences there. And it was really cool. But the manager or my manager at the time at this restaurant told me, and I'll never forget this, there are two reasons people go out to eat. Do you know what those are?
Oh, I do, but I don't want to spoil it for you.
Okay, fair enough. So he told me, and I think hopefully anyone listening will just kind of nod, like, yeah, that's true. There are two reasons people go out to eat dinner. One is to have an experience you can't have at home.
Absolutely.
Whether it's that authentic Italian experience or just some cooking that you can't do. And the other reason is to avoid doing dishes, right? There's nothing wrong with those restaurants, those bars, those pubs, breweries, where their only goal is just to keep you from having to make dinner and do dishes. That's fantastic. If that's what you want to be, right on. More power to you. The topic of this talk today is on how we can create that experience that you cannot have at home. And whether it's going to that Italian restaurant or having Italian beer or going to a little authentic British pub, this is a cheap way to visit Italy. The cheap way to visit an English pub is just go to someone who creates this experience for you, and instead of flying to Europe. And before we define that experience, let's talk about why creating this experience is valuable, why it's important, and why you should consider how to create a better experience. We think about, sorry, I'm going to just look at my notes. Think about those experiences that stand out in your highlight reel of life. I mean, you think about those restaurants you've been to. It's like, oh, that was a great night. That was a great meal. And Andrew and I were talking about this before. If you think about if you're going to go on like a scuba trip or climb Kilimanjaro or go take a tour through a museum, if you hire a guide, that experience is even better. That scuba guide takes you to these really cool places and shows you these really cool animals. You know, someone gets you to Kilimanjaro, whatever it is, you hire these guys to take you on this experience, and they deliver. We're kind of talking about the same thing at your place. We're talking about creating this experience and, more importantly, guiding them. So why is this important? And these are just my thoughts, but I'll share them with you. The reason why we want to create an experience is because you're going to connect with your customers on a much deeper level, and I'll even say it on a neurological level. You think about those experiences that stand out in your life. They've seared either a good or bad memory, whether it's that incredible night, that incredible meal, or drinking too much Jaeger that one night in college. Both of those are very powerful experiences that have seared into your brain, but you're connecting those experiences have connected on a very deep neurological level. Once you have connected with these customers on a deeper level, then you take those customers, become absolute raving fans. Even if you mess up one day, even if you put out a beer that's not the greatest, those raving fans are going to love what you do. They're going to love everything you do, and then those raving fans then turn into a kind of an army of free word of mouth marketers. And I think we all know that word of mouth marketing is probably the best way to do it. That social networking type of thing. But when you've connected with your customers, they become raving fans. They go out and tell everyone they know about who you are and what you're doing. And this is how you start doing better than your competition. You start doing better than those chain pubs that have great wings and the game is on and they've got 200 taps. This is how you start outdoing those places. And given a long enough timeline along the same thought, then we could start talking about reputation and legacy. But we'll skip that stuff for today.
And Jeremy, a while back, I did a study and found that when a guest goes to a tap room for the first time and they have that highly engaging experience that you're talking to right now, when they're just so wowed by the staff and overall vibe, they're 99% likely to return and recommend it to their friends. But when they go and have the experience, that's low level of service, the overall products is just okay, they're only 44% likely to return and recommend to that business. And that means they're not coming back. Unless someone drags them back to that establishment for whatever reason, they're not going to choose to go back to your brewery.
Yeah, and to that same point, I don't remember the exact numbers, but this was like decades ago. The point is the same, that if someone has a good experience, they're going to tell 2 to 4 of their friends. If someone has a bad experience, they're going to tell 7 to 10 of their friends. It was something like that, and it's just, and restaurants, any business really can't afford a bad experience, because people, for whatever reason, due to our psychology, is we want to share with everyone how bad it was and they should never go back. And so the onus is on us to do a better job so that they will tell a few of their friends, and hopefully that will pan out like dominoes and work to our best interest.
No, I love it. We'll save the conversation on Yelp and Untapped for another day.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah. We'll get someone else for that. Let's see. So this is why I think in creating a better experience is important, and of course what we just talked about. Does anyone remember Simon Sinek years ago when he taught us all that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it? It was less about your product. It was more about what you stand for. It was more about, to me, this was more about when you create an experience, when you stand up for something specific, you kind of form a tribe. You form those, instead of customers, you form raving fans, and you connect with, these are my people. This is what I think Simon was talking about. And this is something that I think we can do a better job of in the beer industry. We already all love beer, but like I alluded to earlier, now consumers are thinking, that's great, what else you got? And so we have to come up with an answer for that. Here are a few companies that have done, I think, in my opinion, a great job. One, you got Patagonia. They have created a tribe of planet-loving outdoor athletes where you're not buying board shorts and an expensive jacket. You are contributing to ending the environmental crisis by purchasing these products. Another one could argue Apple. I've got an iPhone. I work on a MacBook Pro. And so some could say that they've kind of formed a tribe as well of innovative and intuitive technological enthusiasts. This one is near and dear to my heart. VW created a tribe with their vans. I used to own a van a long time ago, and it was the greatest vehicle of my life. And I can't wait. Supposedly in 2023, these new electric ones will become available, and I'm looking forward to getting in line for those.
That sounds amazing.
Right. But it's just like, no matter where you go, you see that tribe of people who love their VW vans. And we talked about earlier, if let's get into the beer world. If you're in Central Oregon and you want to basically take a little trip to jolly old England, then you have to go visit my friends at Porter Brewing. They've got the brewery is in Redmond, Oregon. They've got a tap room in downtown Bend. But when you walk into their tap room in downtown Bend, you walk down these steps like you're going down to Cheers. You walk inside and it's dimly lit. There's brick wall, leather, and there's authentic British ales served only on cask, pulled through engines. That's all they serve. And it is the cheapest trip to England you will take if you're in Central Oregon. Another one in Oregon, Wolves and People. They do very incredible, very farm-specific beers that are brewed on a farm. Even if they brew an IPA, it's still a farm IPA because it's on a farm. And most people have heard of Jester King. That's another great farm experience where you could even go take death metal goat yoga while you're drinking their beer as well. It's incredible.
And did you take that death metal goat yoga course?
I was not there when they did the death metal goat yoga, but just seeing it listed as an option made me think I'm horrible at yoga and I'm not a death metal enthusiast, but I would do that. So next time I'm there, I need to do the death metal goat yoga class.
Yeah, it absolutely sounds like a unique experience.
Absolutely. Because where else in the world could you concoct something like that, right? I recently had the occasion to go to the Beer Now conference or give a talk at the Beer Now conference, and we were at Vista Brewing. It was just not far from Jester King, and they are creating a destination of their own, and that is a fantastic experience. Then we get into back to Oregon, Ale Song. They're doing very creative beers that blur the line between wine and beer, and every time they release a beer, there's usually some fancy cheese and a big party that goes along with it. It's fantastic. And then the last thing I want to share, it's a brand new brewery that I visited in Denver during CBC. They had been open just a few months, but this is a brewery dedicated to fostering the spirit of Jamaica. I mean, the artwork, obviously the music, the aesthetics, but even the type of flavors that they have within their beer styles. I mean, they're trying to foster this community, give a space for that. These are entities that, in my opinion, are doing some great things as far as creating an experience that, for me, are very memorable and make me want to go back and become a raving fan.
Now, Jeremy, I have a question for you. When you're traveling, and I know how much you love to travel, and you're going to an area you've never visited before, how do you decide which brewery to visit? I mean, are you looking for the ones that have Jamaican-inspired craft brewing in your name that just catch you off guard? Are you looking for the events calendar where you can do that death metal goat yoga? Or, how are you deciding if you don't know any breweries already in the area?
Yeah, I thank you for that question. My approach to that, and I'd love to hear other people's approach. My approach to that is I honestly do some research. I get on and first figure out what are all the breweries there. Are there any names that I recognize that I've been dying to visit? Sometimes I'll go and look at recommendations or reviews, but you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. If I go to a brewery or if I look at a brewery and say this is the best hazy IPA in the world, well, if I'm not in the mood for hazy IPA, then that's kind of lost on me. But I am interested in those unique breweries that are different from the norm, and so I do look for something that really that really kind of sticks out. And I'm trying to think of an example. A good example would be a couple of years ago we were on the Big Island of Hawaii. And it's like, I'm a beer guy. I'm in Hawaii. This is a perfect life right here. And so I was looking up different breweries that are available. Of course, there's Kona Brewing that I do like their beers. There's other breweries there, but there was one called Ola Brewing, OLA, where they, when I did the research and looked at them, they talked about how their whole purpose, I should have put them on this list. Their whole purpose was to, they were a community-owned brewery. Their whole purpose was to give back to the local agriculture and create this circle benefit, and so I went to visit them just because I liked what they were about, and their beers, their ciders were fantastic, and everything that they're doing is just done really, really, really well and really mindful. So that's my approach to trying to find a place that I want to go visit.
No, it's fantastic insight right there.
Yeah. Because I mean, there's a lot of really good breweries out there, but everyone's got an IPA, everyone's got a hazy IPA. I'm kind of like, well, I'm one of those people saying, "What else you got?" So that's my approach. So let's talk about how we create an experience. As luck would have it, I've had a conversation about this topic a week and a half ago with Randy Mosher, and that's going to be a podcast episode that releases in the new year. Talk with the man who taught us all about beer, about how to create that experience. And the thing that he said is, you cannot be everything to everybody. If you want to try to be everything to everybody, if you want to open up that community restaurant with TVs and kids menus and dog parks, and that's fantastic. If that's what you want, then be that. But again, we're talking about how to create this unique, specific experience, and to understand that you can't please everybody is, for me, and in all of my restaurant experience, is it kind of takes the pressure off. I don't need to cater to an older retired crowd, or the middle-aged with kids crowd, and the young singles who want to listen to music, and the crowd that wants to drink a lot, and the bachelorette parties, and the people that want to bring their kids and all their dogs and all their animals. And I don't need to cater to every single one of those groups. I need to be very specific on who I'm talking to. And the way that I've been doing that, the way that I would suggest people consider, is understand, who are you? And this is one of those kind of silly questions that maybe we should be drinking beer when we ask these questions. But what are your experiences? What do you stand for? What is your story? What's important to you? Are you interested in standing up for environmental justice or social justice, or you just want to make money, or you want to create a community of outdoor athletes, or people who love the ocean, or whatever it is? Be very clear on what's important to you, and at that point, that's your indicator of that. This is what our business, our pub, our brewery needs to be. I always think about flavor as a way to communicate, much like color, much like music. But if we were to do an exercise and ask you, what is your beer, what does your business have to say, then are you actually saying that? Are you actually contributing what you want to contribute? What are you trying to do that's bigger than your business, that's bigger than your beer? And then lastly, it's, who specifically are you talking to? If you're talking to everybody, then you're probably talking to nobody. So I would urge you to be very clear in what you stand for, and what you're trying to say, and who you're trying to say it to. I think those are very helpful to exercises to just kind of have considered.
And Jeremy, looking a little bit deeper at the target customer, because like you said, you can't be everything to everybody. Are there just a few or a handful of questions you can pose to a brewery owner or taproom manager that they should be asking themselves when trying to define that target customer?
I think the questions would be simpler. It's like, who do you want to see in your patio? It's one of the other things that I say is that there's two types of restaurants. There's the family friendly, and then there's the family tolerant. And that's because I'm a beer lover. I love going out and I love eating. I'm a foodie, but I'm usually bringing my wife and kids with me. And while I'm having a beer, my wife is going to have a wine. My kids are going to have a soda or a juice. They're going to ask if they can have dessert. If we go into a restaurant and we feel like this is one of those family tolerant restaurants, then it's just not. It makes me not want to come back. And so I'd ask those business owners: do you want to see a bunch of dogs out in your backyard? Do you want to bring in those people? Do you want to bring the people who are just coming off the mountain and want to opera ski, burger, and a beer? Do you want to cater to the tourists? Do you want to cater to the people like me who are going to bring their family? if your answer is yes to any of these, then what's going to bring the dogs there? What's going to bring the families there? What's going to bring the athletes there? I'm not a big fan of having TVs in a place and having the game on, because nothing derails an experience than like a TV with a game on. But if you want that après ski culture to come into your place, then maybe you put some Warren Miller films on and kind of foster that stoke, so to speak, as just an example. Hopefully that answers your question, Andrew, but that's kind of.
It does. And it's funny that you mentioned TVs, because this has oddly been a hot topic recently. There was a conversation recently in Crappy Professionals about, how can you get away with not having TVs in your tap room? And that surprised a lot of people, because so many tap rooms don't have TVs. And yesterday I was having a similar conversation with Andrew Oland of Moosehead Breweries. And, we came up with the question of, should you have a TV in a tap room? And my response, outside of maybe using it as to show unique film, like you just mentioned, or perhaps use it for a menu, was, we go to tap rooms to connect with people, to connect with our friends, to connect with strangers, to spend it with our family. And I want to talk to a person. I don't want to sit next to someone at a bar and both, watch that TV together. We're all already there for the common love of craft beer. So let's let that be the talking point that kind of gets the conversation going, versus saying, hey, what are you watching on TV that we both enjoy? It's all about that natural community.
Yeah. And that's where it's like, if Andrew, you and I are going to go somewhere and we just got done, scuba diving or spearfishing or something like that, then having films showing surfing and spearfishing, stuff like that, that's just going to continue our stoke. And if that's the clientele you want in, great, do that. If it's the après ski and the Warren Miller, great. But there are some of those restaurants and breweries and pubs that I've been to where it really is just about a family-friendly place. It's not meant to foster much of an experience, but that's where, like, we'll get crayons and a blank piece of paper. And I used to play this game with my kids where we just like draw a little shape, and then you have to draw a picture out of that. And then my daughter would draw a shape and I have to draw a picture out of that. And it was just, that was a way that I turned that into engaging with my family in a place that just had the game on. I'm one of those guys that I'm not really interested in what's happening in the game right now. But even if it's one of those family friendly places and that's the target customer you want to bring in there, maybe you have some games that while we're waiting for our food or eating our fries and drinking a beer, we can play a game with the family and just have some fun with it. These are just ways to, if not create a unique experience, bring people together, I think would be the next equally worthy goal there, from my experience.
No, I love it.
Yeah. So for me, this is the first step of figuring out what type of experience we're going to create, because every experience is going to be different. And we've got to ask, what does that mean? It's going to be different. It's going to be what you want it to be, what's important to you. And then from there, trying to be as consistent as possible in creating this experience. And Andrew, you asked me earlier, what stands out for me. As soon as you walk in, I mean, we're visual creatures, and as beer judges, the first thing we're taught to do is look at the beer. And what does it look like? What information are you gathering? Probably not much that you can hang your hat on and form any solid conclusions at this point, but we're still gathering information. Does this feel like somewhere I want to bring my kids? If it's kind of like a dark bar with pool tables and some that serves French fries, I may not want to take my kids there just because that's not the place I want to take my kids. But if it's light, I love outdoors, I love big windows, I love natural light. To me, that just makes my soul sing. And so that's going to bring me in right away. If it smells good, if the lighting is good. Recently went to a local restaurant and we had to pull out our phones and turn the lights on just so we could read the menu. And I appreciate dim mood lighting, but if we can't see the menu, then that's a problem, right?
Oh my gosh.
Right. And being a creative person that deals with photography and videos, like, what color is the lighting? Is it bright, like bluish white daylight color? Is it dim kind of yellowish color? But lighting, the art that's put in there is very important. For me, the aroma of the restaurant. If I walk into a restaurant and it doesn't smell good, then my brain is saying, yeah, you might want to rethink this. I have another great example I'll share. One of my favorite restaurants in Las Vegas is off strip, and it was an Argentinian steakhouse. That when we first went there, we took a cab, went off the strip, and it was in this tiny little strip mall that it was kind of, it appeared to be kind of a rundown neighborhood, so much so that even the cab driver asked us, "Hey, do you want me to wait in case we want to leave?" And I was with my father and another person, and we walked into this restaurant, and it looked like a butcher shop. I mean, it just had a case full of different meats. And then off to the left, there were a few tables, and we were like, "Oh, what have we done? We should just turn around and go back." But we stayed the course, and we ordered some of the most incredible mixed grilled meats. I mean, they served meat on this smoking charcoal grill on your table, and it was one of the best meals I've had in my life. And so the atmosphere told me a story that was like, you're not going to want to be there. But the food and the aroma of the place is what brought me in and kept me there, and it paid off. I've gone back since, and it's just one of those things where if they could create this atmosphere that brought us in, then it would be so much better. One of my big things too are comfortable seats. If you're one of those restaurants and it's a churn and burn, you want people to kind of move along, and that's your business model, great. Then put those hard wooden seats or those booth seats that kind of drop down too low, and it puts the table up at your chest, so you kind of have to raise your arms up really high. If you want people to keep on moving, great. Then give them incentive not to stay. But if you want them to stay, if you want them to sit there for a while and have 2, 3, 4 beers, then it's got to be comfortable. And the question I have for anyone who has a pub or business is, have you actually sat at every single table in your brewery and considered how it feels from that vantage point? I think
that's
that
a
would be
fantastic question.
Yeah, I think there are tables that everyone wants, and there are tables that people avoid. Do you know why? And so I think everyone should sit at every table in their place just so they can get an idea of what's going to happen there.
And so often owners, take it for granted that people come and enjoy the place, and they don't look at the little things like how comfortable the seat is or why people do or don't like sitting somewhere. That's a fantastic area of attention should be paid.
Yeah, and really all it could be just for a few seconds, but you just think, how does it feel? And like, no one wants that table by the kitchen door, right? Because there's going to be a lot of traffic and a lot of disruption. And maybe we just need to find a different spot for that table. Going back to that manager that I worked for at Il Fornaio, one of the other things that he shared that I've never forgotten is, if you want a good sense of how clean and how well run a restaurant is, take one look at their bathroom. And by extension, I've since taken my own experience, and by extension, take a look at their kitchen. I prefer those restaurants where you can see the kitchen, because there's nowhere for messes to hide. I've gone into some restaurants and seen the kitchen and thought, oh dear God, I'm never going to eat here again. But anyone can go into the bathroom, and we've all had those experiences where you walk into the bathroom and you think, oh God, who died in here? The restaurant may look good, but if they're not keeping these lesser seen places clean, then it's fair to think that maybe they don't have everything going on that they ought to. This is one of my little, it's kind of like a little quick litmus test, or that famous story of Van Halen put in their contract that they have to have a bowl of only brown M&Ms on the table for their green room. And that really wasn't about the brown M&Ms. That was just a way for them to ensure that whoever was going through their contract took care of every last little detail. So going into the bathroom of a restaurant is like the brown M&Ms for Van Halen.
No, I love that story, and I think I've heard it multiple times before. And I don't know if Van Halen was the focal point of it last time, or maybe some other classic rock band, but the point is the same, just the attention to detail.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's like, and you have to have that little thing. What's that one little thing that you notice that's going to let you know this place is okay, or I'm not going to have a good experience here. And for me, it's the bathrooms, or if I can see the kitchen. And then lastly, we were talking about this already. If you're going to an Italian restaurant to have an authentic Italian experience, but they've got the TV's on and we're watching baseball. Well, now I'm no longer in Italy. If you have TVs on and you're watching, uh, uh, soccer or football, and it's the Italian teams playing, okay, maybe, but having TVs there kind of takes me out of the experience. If I'm going to a sports bar because I want to watch the World Series or the Super Bowl or whatever it is, then that makes sense. That's what I'm there for, and that's great. And again, if you and I are coming off the mountain and we want to go have a beer and a burger and watch some Warren Miller films, right on. But if you want to create an experience, but you've got a TV that just derails that experience, then consider the value of having that there. And there's nothing wrong with not having a TV in your place, right? Um, the next thing, I mean, I put atmosphere first just because it's the first thing that I notice. I think more importantly to me, and it sounds like to you, Andrew, are your employees.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. When I go somewhere and I'm looking for the human interaction, I think we're all craving it right now. I'm absolutely looking at, how that employee is going to engage with me. If I'm walking in for a first time and they don't recognize me, are they going to say, "Hey, this your first time visiting? Have you been here before? Would you like to start with the flight? Let me teach you something about the brewery." I'm all about those
Yeah.
connections.
Yeah. Now the challenge here, now, I mean, we got to call out the elephant in the room is, we're still dealing with the dregs of the pandemic, and hopefully we don't have another resurgence of it. But I mean, we're dealing with people who are just trying to find enough employees, period, let alone finding great employees. And if we're talking about the service industry, it's more common, in my experience, more common to have people who are there to get them through school, or as a second job, or it's just a flexible job while they figure the everything else out. There are fewer people, at least in America. It's different abroad, but at least in America, there are fewer people who are career hospitality staff than not. And so I recognize that challenge. There are a lot of things you can do to well educate your staff, to slightly educate your staff. There's a lot of things that we could do today that will make things better, and so I'm going to focus on those things rather than the arc of all that stuff. But um, uh, the thing with this too is having your servers, your bartenders, even your bussers, your kitchen staff, do they know your product? I think the biggest thing that we need to remember is, if Andrew, if you and I own a place, you and I are not going to connect with each and every guest. You and I are not going to take each and every order and serve all the food. So our employees are basically our ambassadors, our agents for the business. We rely on them. The employees are everything to this business.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yep. And it should be the goal to get the employees as passionate as the owners, and that's a challenge. It's absolutely a challenge.
that's absolutely a challenge. And I'm not gonna deny that. But part of that challenge is, I've had really good managers, like I mentioned at Ilford Isle, and I've had some really bad managers that just destroy the vibe, that make everyone stressed out. And if I'm stressed out, I'm taking that stress to the table, and it's going to be palpable. And there are times when we're sitting in a brewery or pub, and you can tell that server is in the weeds, or just got chewed out, or they're just not there right now, and it just derails that experience. So I I'm going to advocate that everyone just takes exceptionally good care of their employees. And so, what does that mean? I've been to breweries where they are beer savvy; they know what they're talking about. A brewery I worked at in Bend, they put all of their employees, even kitchen staff, through a training that was the equivalent of the first level Cicerone. Everyone knew their stuff really, really well. The brewery had a mission and a purpose, and everyone was on board with that mission and purpose. Um, and it's valuable because not only are your employees going to represent you at the table, in the kitchen, at your business, but they're going to leave work at some point. They're going to talk to their friends about what it's like to work at your brewery and your pub. They're going to go out other places and have drinks, and they're going to share with their friends what their experience is. They're going to recommend the good beer or not recommend the bad beer. The ripples of the effect of your employees goes on and on and on and on. And so making sure that your employees are very well educated. If you have the wherewithal to put all of your staff through a great education program, great. That's going to be nothing but benefit. The question I hear is, well, what if we educate them and they leave? Well, all of your employees are going to leave at some point. But if they're well taken care of and they're well educated, then they're going to continue advocating for you for years on end. The inverse to that is, what if you don't educate them and they stay? I've been to breweries where I've asked the bartender questions, and you could tell that I flat out just stumped her. She didn't know what she was talking about. And I asked her, how long have you been here? Thinking she was brand new. And she told me, I've been here for 4 years. And she didn't really know about the beer. She didn't know about the brewery. And it was just like, you're not providing a good experience of this particular brewery. And that's a liability in my book.
And I think a simple solution to that is, because not everyone's going to know the answer to every question. But if you don't know the answer, go find out. Ask someone who does. And simply telling the customer, hey, I don't know what hops are used in this beer, but let me go ask the brewer, and coming back with an answer, that's going to help define that experience and make it more memorable.
Yeah. And next time they will know that answer. They will know, like moving from Oregon, where we had fantastic brewing water, down to Arizona now, where there's pretty hard water. I've had some questions about, the water is going to the beer, and there's a place I won't name, but even talking to the brewers, they were just like, yeah, we just kind of run it through a filter and that's all we do. And even the brewers weren't really up to speed on what it is there's, about their water. And granted, I'm a beer nerd and I'm an inquiring mind that wants to know, but it's like, these are things that people that the staff should know. I'm a firm believer that you should know more than your average customer when it comes to your product, your beer, and the experience you're trying to convey. So empower your employees, educate them. If you have a story, if you're trying to cultivate the Jamaican experience, are your employees buying into that story? If you're trying to solve the environmental crisis through board shorts and jackets, are your employees buying into that story and then sharing that story with your raving fans? The other thing that's important to me, especially having been a server and a bartender off and on for decades, I think it's extremely, extremely important to educate and empower your employees to the point where they are no longer mere order takers. I don't need someone to come to the table and say, can I take your order, write it down, go back, put it in the computer, bring my food out. That is that minimum standard we talked about before. What's even better is to create table leaders. This is the server where she comes to the table, she greets and meets everyone, and asks people, so what are you in the mood for today? What kind of beer do you like? And makes a suggestion. It's like, I like an amber ale. Well, we don't have an amber ale, but we've just brewed an alt beer that you might actually like. I'm going to bring you one, see if you like it, see if you're feeling that today. It's someone who goes to the table and owns the table. He or she knows what they're talking about, and they are going to take control and responsibility for those guests having a good experience. That, I think, is probably one of the most important things. Andrew, you and I talked about this or alluded to this a bit earlier. If you have servers like that are empowered and educated, you could have a bad day in the kitchen where things don't come out right. You could have a beer that kind of bombs. But if you got servers like that, they're going to make up for that and cultivate people coming back and giving it a second, third try. And the other thing too is, again, empowering your servers is, if there's a problem, allow your servers to take care of it within reason and give them the parameters. They don't need to come to manager and bottleneck the process every single time, especially when it's busy. Give them the ability to take care of problems, solve problems, and just delight their guests. This is what they're there for. They are your representatives. They're your agents. Give them the power to do so. Yeah, I think employees is one of my most important things on there. But at some point, we do need to talk about, if we're talking about breweries, we need to talk about beer and food. I mean, the beer's got to be good. The food's got to be good. This is not a talk on how to create good beer, good food. But again, Andrew and I kind of talked about earlier is the best thing, in my opinion, is to have that staff member that can tell you all about that food choice. Yes, this is freshly made hummus today. We source local ingredients and herbs from this farm down the road. And you'll notice it has this, a wonderful, unique flavor that is really unique to us. And I think it pairs really well with our Kolsch that we just kegged last week. So it's as fresh as you can get. This is the stuff that I am looking for when I go out.
And while a ton of my best experiences in tap rooms, they are about having a great beer, there's so many that I can think of when I left the tap room and I didn't say that lager was the best I've ever had or the IPA was fantastic. I went, wow, Jeremy knew so much. And I left that tap room learning something. And that's going to make me want to come back. That's when my mind was truly blown on a whole new level.
Well, and that's where it's like, if I'm somewhere and like, yes, that hummus sounds amazing, I'll take that. And what was that beer you just mentioned? What's a Kolsch? I don't know. I've never heard of a Kolsch. If your server can say, oh, well, let me tell you, oh my gosh, that is the coup de grace when it comes to an experience. That is, frankly, this is where back in my day, it's like, let me go get you a sample of it, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Because one, that buys me time as a server, so I can check my tables. But I can give them the sample. They can taste it and experience it while I share with them a very short synopsis of what a Kolsch is and what they ought to be tasting and why it goes so well with that hummus. Oh my gosh, I will go back again. That's how I become a raving fan.
Yeah, it's that extra layer of hospitality that absolutely makes a difference.
But if you're one of those places that you don't have servers that can do that, or you have new servers that are working their way to be able to do that, I know some places will intentionally not put beer descriptions down there because they want their staff to engage. Fantastic. If you don't have staff that can engage, then empower the customer. Empower people like me and Andrew, where I know what a Ola Brewing is, but tell me what flavor profiles are coming out of yours, because everyone's Ola Brewing is going to be different. It's kind of like we go and look at a wine list. I can't even pronounce half those names sometimes. But if I'm trying to order a nice wine to go with my roast duck or whatever it is, then either the server needs to tell me what it is, or someone needs to give me a good suggestion, or I need to be able to make that decision on my own through descriptions of the food, descriptions of the drink. And maybe even a pairing suggestion. This goes great with that. I also really enjoy that. I like seeing what people are doing, and it's just a suggestion. But these are ways to provide that enough information to your customers so they're not left in the dark, waiting for a server to pull them back into the light. And as far as the beer and food goes too, and I'm going to talk about Wagwan again, that brewery that kind of inspires the spirit of Jamaica. They're creating food that is in line with the experience they're trying to create. If you're a brewery that's kind of like a farmhouse brewery and you want to use local ingredients, then maybe not get your food off the Cisco truck. Maybe you get your food from the farm down the road, because that adds to the story, that adds to the flavor, that adds to the experience. But even with back to Wagwan, even with the beer, I mean, you can go get a Munich Dunkel, or you can get a Munich Dunkel with coconut. You can get a Kolsch, or you can get a Kolsch infused with jackfruit. So they're using these flavors to kind of transport you to the island. And so using beer and food to continue your purpose, your values, what you stand for, why are you there, what are you trying to communicate. You can use your beer and food to do that as well. And going to a brewery and a pub where I'll have an IPA and a burger with sweet potato fries. There are a billion of those. They're delicious. I love them, but there are a billion of those. Are there ways that you can be different and equally as delicious? Are there ways that you can take a different spin on what's been done ad nauseum before? Those are some of the things I think about when it comes to beer and food. And honestly, along those lines, we go to breweries. They always have T-shirts and hats and all this other stuff like that too. My personal pet peeve is, and this is true with anything, but if there's a T-shirt and it just simply says the name of the business, I feel like I'm paying you in order to advertise for your business, and I'm like, that doesn't do anything for me. But if we're going to that brewery that's all about the outdoor culture and they're playing Warren Miller films, then maybe you've got this really cool stylized logo. Or if you're an environmental brewery, you've got this really cool logo, tagline, and image. To me, that's where I want to align with your brand. I want to be part of that tribe. I want to become a raving fan and share that experience. And so merchandise is another way that you can align all this stuff. I know we're getting close to the end of time, so I'm going to start wrapping this up. But did you want to chime in there, Andrew?
I would say, Jeremy, share whatever you'd like to share. I think everybody's enjoying.
Okay, we got plenty of time then?
Yeah. I'm on the schedule.
Okay, perfect. So we've got a little bit more to go, but so I want to talk about customers a little bit. There is an adage out there that the customer is always right, and we have been brainwashed that the customer is always right, and we need to do whatever it takes to make that customer happy. And I'm here to tell you today that not every customer is right, and you don't have to make them all happy. Hopefully that takes a load off everyone's shoulders, because if you have a customer that goes into the Italian restaurant and they say, can we just have mac and cheese? We're feeling mac and cheese. The answer can veritably be, no, we don't offer that here. How about something from the menu? That is perfectly okay, because worst case scenario, that customer is going to get mad, they're going to leave, and they're never going to come back. And now you don't have to deal with difficult customers like that anymore. The word will eventually get out that this is who we serve, this is what we stand for, and you will attract your target customer by holding your line and basically being who you are and doing what you say you're going to do. That's the first thing I want to say in that regard. But when it gets to creating that experience with your guests, we all have our challenges, and you've got to take this with a grain of salt. But again, I'm going to go back to my Il Fornaio experience and that manager I had. He was a phenomenal manager. He was the type of guy that, we were in Orange County. This was a big restaurant. This was, there are literally millions of people that would come through that restaurant every year. But that manager that I had, he knew people by name. He remembered conversations. He remembered what they did for a living. He remembered their kids' names. Part of his job on a nightly basis, all the servers, we were all doing our jobs. Bartending, we're doing our jobs. He was there to solve problems when we had them. But when he wasn't solving problems, he had everything running really well. So he went and would engage with the customers. He was always dressed really well, and he would shake hands. He would say hello. He would chat. He would say, "Welcome back. I hope you're enjoying your calamari fritti. And is there anything else we can get you?" This is how you create these raving fans, by getting personal with your customers, by getting personal, by getting into their neurological level and creating that good experience. And granted, we all know if there's a problem, we've got to respond quickly. It's nice to be able to over deliver in those situations. And we talked about, let your staff do that. Empower your staff to over deliver and solve problems. These are kind of basic things, but not everyone's doing them. And so if you can do them well, then you're going to stand out. Along those lines too, with sharing stories with your customers. That we're going to jump forward real quick into marketing social media. Granted, you need permission before you put people on social media, just to kind of keep everything legitimate and not get in a legal trouble. But talk to your customers. If you have Ed that sits at the bar every Tuesday, and Ed's got a great story, and he's been there every Tuesday since the beginning, and you want to name a beer after him, well, tell the story about Ed. Share Ed's story. Share these stories with everyone else. We love hearing about ourselves. We love hearing about each other. If we are going to form a tribe with you, then let's all get to know each other. Let's introduce customers across the table. If you know Ed sits over there and Jane sits here every Wednesday, and they happen to be there on a Thursday, introduce them. Say, hey, you guys are here every day. In fact, you share the same stool. You guys, introduce them. They're part of the tribe. They want to be part of the tribe. So form your tribe and share these stories and introduce your tribal members with each other. But along with that too is getting to know people. This is kind of like dating. Get to know them. Share your stories. What's important to your customer? When you ask and you give them a safe place to do so, they will tell you what they want, why they're there, what's working, what's not working, so that you can then take that information and figure out, here's how I can improve our overall experience. Because Ed, who is a tribal member, he knows who we are and what we stand for. He just gave me a really good tip on maybe we ought to do this instead. This is an excellent source of free info to improve everything.
I couldn't agree more. Simply asking your best customers what they would like to see, whether you're talking beer styles, whether you're talking events, whether you're talking merchandise, they can give you that idea that you didn't know you needed to do. It's a perfect source of inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're there. They want. I mean, we want to tell you. If you ask me, I want to tell you what's working, what's not working, because I want it better next time I'm there. And so that's a fantastic opportunity there. Let's talk a little bit about marketing and community interaction. If you're a brewery and your focus is on the environment, do you support any environmental things? Do you support education in the schools? If you are a sports bar, do you sponsor a local soccer team? If you are a family-friendly place, are you doing the same thing? Basically, if you're going to stand for something, does that thing that you stand for, does that exist only within the doors in your property line, or does that exist beyond? Are you part of your local community? Are you part of your state community? Are you part of the larger beer industry because of what you're doing? I think a good example there would be Maui Brewing, Garrett Marrero out in Maui, Hawaii. I know I've talked quite a bit about Hawaii this talk, and maybe I need a vacation, but Garrett has created that brewery in such a way where it has become as environmentally friendly as possible, partly out of necessity because they are an island and power is expensive. Getting carbon dioxide is expensive. So they've done a lot of innovations to that, but he's very involved with the local government and making things better, not only for his brewery, but other restaurants and breweries throughout the county of Maui and the state of Hawaii. But he's also gotten involved nationally as well by being part of the Brewers Association and trying to not just be what he wants to be at Maui Brewing in his doors there in Kihei, but to really engage in a larger way. And I think that is a great example of someone who's, this is what we stand for. This is who we want to be. This is our tribe, and we want to stand up for even our competitors in some cases, because this is the right thing to do. I think that level of community interaction on a local and larger scale is just phenomenal.
I agree with you. And it really ties back into what you said earlier, Jeremy, about knowing who you are, because that's going to define who you partner with, the types of events that you have. And that's going to help create the tribe that you have, because it's going to be people who align with everything that you're doing.
Yeah. And that's the community interaction piece. And then that, I mean, all of this should be absolutely consistent when it comes to branding and marketing and your social media and basically the way that you communicate with the world. If, you know, if really strange stories, and I won't get into details, but there's a brewery that I'm aware of that really stood for something really, really good. But the owner, to put it nicely, was a bit of a loose cannon and had the keys to the social media engine and caused a lot of problems. And employees had to do a lot of damage control. But he was the owner, so there's you, there wasn't a lot you could do. Um, that really derailed the message of what the brewery was designed to do, what the message it was there for, what it was trying to communicate. And so making sure that everyone is on board, even the owners, even the leadership, management, everyone has to be on board with this, because we are going in this direction. And when we come together, then we will have a lot of force behind that. Um, so making sure that everything is just tight in that regard. And ultimately, that will come around to building a reputation, building a legacy. We think about, um, in this day and age, in 2021, no one is going to build a legacy on a pale ale. However, Sierra Nevada did that. Granted, they were the first ones to brew, or not the first ones, but they were the ones to really make pale ale the flavor of America. But they've built a reputation because they held their line all the way along. Deschutes Brewery, Rogue Brewery. I'm more familiar with breweries out in West Coast and Oregon, but there's all these breweries that have done an excellent job uh, being who they are and holding true to that line. So it's going to be exciting to see younger breweries, newer breweries, be who they are and hold that line. Jester King is another one of those that we talked about earlier that has defined who they are, and they're holding their line, and their messaging, their imaging, their branding, everything is in line with that, and it's wonderful. So if I were to summarize all of the stuff for everyone out there, if there's a take home message, is to make good beer, but be different. Be different than the rest. If you want to create an experience that people will talk about and come back to, and not just be that place that helps you avoid making dinner and doing dishes. If you want to create this memorable experience, be different. We are all different. Be different. And how do we be different? By just being who you really are. Um, because who you really are, as different as you are, is awesome. And people want to go along that journey. So be different, be you, and take us along that journey. That's where it gets really exciting and really interesting.
Those are great words of wisdom. And I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier today. You've referenced so many different companies and people outside of the craft beer space. You've talked a lot about your time at Il Fornaio and how influential that was for you. You've talked about Patagonia, Apple, VW, and I hope you get one of those buckets when they come out again. But if craft beer learns something from companies outside of our industry, what do you wish craft beer would learn and take away from other industries?
So I think one of the things that I think about is, uh, in craft beer, we seem to have this thing where big equals bad. Big doesn't equal bad. Bad equals bad. Um, Bad behavior equals bad. Bad beer equals bad. Uh, Bad logistics. So that's bad. Big isn't bad. So uh, big isn't necessarily a problem. Um, but I think we need to remember who we are in the beginning. I mean, I included Apple in that list uh, of, of of people who are doing things the right way, because they didn't start out trying to create just another computer. They tried to create something different. The iPhone came out not because they wanted to get into the phone market. They wanted to create something different. If you remember their tagline from like 2003 or whatever it was, no, earlier than that, with the iPod, their tagline was 1,000 songs in your pocket. If you remember back then, you think how overwhelmingly awesome that idea was. I mean, in my lifetime, I remember 8-track tapes. I remember record players. I remember cassettes. I remember CDs, and to take a few of those albums with you to play on your player was like cool. But now all of a sudden, I could stick 1,000 songs in my pocket. Holy moly! These are the innovators. These are the ones that are leading the charge. They're thinking differently. If you want to go back and far enough in time, that's why we have craft beer in the first place, because we had people who wanted to think differently and do something that was horrifically risky, that by all stretch of the imagination should have failed. But luckily for us, it didn't. So it's going to take some mojo. It's going to take some moxie to do something different, to be the quote unquote the pilgrims of this process, because there are historical examples of we want to try something different. It's a big risk. It may not work, but if it does, it's going to be awesome. And it's those awesome experiences is really what people are going to line up for.
That's a really great comment there, Jeremy, because, we're going to have to fail along the way, and we're going to have to celebrate those failures and learn from them, because that's how we truly get better, as a brewery and as an industry.
Yep. Yeah. One of the things I heard when I was younger is, if it were easy, it'd be boring. So let's do the hard stuff and be ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. Now, Jeremy, as we wind down, is there anything else you would like to add, or how can everybody listening today get a hold of you?
If anyone wants to reach out to me, I spend of my social media time, the lion's share is on Instagram, and I'm at Good Beer Matters. You can go to my website, goodbeermatters.net. You can send me an email at jeremy@goodbeermatters.net. But I would urge everyone, please go listen to the podcast. I've got some really great people that are coming on and sharing their information, their insights. Andrew's going to be on in the early part of next year. My focus really is on people in all aspects of the brewery biz. Maybe it's just a restaurant that serves beer, or it's a brewery or a brewer. I want to create better experiences. I want to educate people on the craft and the cultural context of the beer world, so that it can get better, so that it's constantly evolving and just getting even more and more exciting. That's the nature of my work. And so hopefully you guys will join me along that journey by sharing stories from all the excellent journeys that everyone else is on. That's my take home for that.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, thanks for joining today. Thanks for sharing so much great wisdom. And, everybody definitely check out Jeremy on Good Beer Matters. He has insightful conversations, and I love how you ask the questions that we're not hearing every day. It results for a good time.
Yeah. And Andrew, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm glad we were able to get this going today.
And I'm looking forward to that beer in person, Jeremy. See you soon.
Yeah. Soon. See ya.
Cheers.
See you, everyone.